April 6th work session to order. So council, because we are doing this virtually, our clerk needs us to verbally say present or not. So I'll just go down by district. So Councilmember Jensen, Mayor Pro Tem.
She's here. Her audio and video are just off. Hold please.
So she's walking in.
Do I need to resend her the list?
So Jennifer, are they off of me?
And who is trying to get a roll call from?
So as I call their name, just go up and unmute them if they're muted. Okay. All right. So Mayor Pro Tem, are you here? Mayor Pro Tem?
Hang on, let me text her. I'll text her now.
All right, take care.
Here she is.
All right, council, we'll start it again. So Mayor Pro Tem Jensen here. Is her audio not right?
Her audio's not working.
Can y'all see her?
We cannot see her.
I can see Kathy, yes.
Oh, you
Yeah,
can?
I see it now.
All right. Councilmember Ingram,
Councilmember Ingram here.
Councilmember Waddell,
I am here.
Councilmember Hare,
Yes, sir.
Councilmember Dawkins,
Present.
Councilmember Davis is here, but you need to say it for the record, sir.
Councilman Davis is here.
Councilman Wright,
He's here.
Councilman Wright,
Yes.
all right. Councilmember Banks McLaughlin, okay, and Councilmember Kinston,
Here.
and I go back to, we were missing Mayor Pro Tem and Banks McLaughlin, I think, were the two missing. So, and I'll go, Councilmember, Mayor Pro Tem, are you here?
I can't hear you now.
She's unmuted.
So she needs to tell her phone with the audio.
Looks like she's on her iPad. Or computer or something.
All right, Madam Clerk, the Mayor Pro Tem is here, having
She
some
can wait.
technical difficulties. Can you wave, Mayor Pro Tem? Acknowledge you can hear us.
Okay.
Did she wait?
She's waiting.
Okay. All right. Councilmember Banks McLaughlin, are you here? Okay. All right. So council, we have a quorum, so we will start with the invocation. I guess we'll get Pastor and Councilmember Davis.
Yes, let's all bow our heads, please. Gracious Father, we thank you right now for this day that you've given us. Right now, God, we come before you asking you for wisdom and that knowledge and understanding in this time of need, in this time of leadership. God, let us come together to do the work that you've placed in our hands to do. Bless all of those who are serving in any and every capacity as we face this global pandemic. We trust you above everything, God. We follow you through anything. In you we live, move, and have our being. Face this as a family. In Jesus Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Item 3.0 is the approval of the agenda.
Mayor Colvin,
Yes?
before we
Councilmember
approve, I'm requesting that we take a consensus as to whether or not we can add an item to the agenda, the item that I sent the email out about.
Okay, so is that a motion, Councilmember Waddell?
Yes, I make a motion that we add the item to take a consensus, a formal consensus as to whether or not we'll move forward with the bond conversation.
So there's a motion by Councilmember Waddell. Is there a second? I heard.
Second by Councilmember Ingram.
Second by Councilmember Ingram.
Now I have a question, Attorney McDonald. Given it will, in this situation, my understanding is it will require a supermajority. Given how many people we have on the call, what would that be?
It's 3/4 of the members present. I'm sorry. Let me do that math, or somebody can do that math for us.
We've got 9, so
3/4 of 9, so it'd be 7.
Okay, and so to clarify my motion is that we take a vote in regards to, or a consensus in regards to the information that was discussed in small group meeting to determine whether or not we'll continue to have the conversation about infrastructure and public safety bond.
So this is a motion to add an agenda item after the request date, which, as explained, will take a supermajority. So there's a motion on the floor by Councilmember Waddell, a second by Councilmember Ingram. As I said before in our meetings, I think the city has a policy regarding deadlines for submissions of things to be included on work sessions. So this would be a supermajority, kind of similar to what we did with the PwC discussion. Whether or not this item will be discussed, although there was some direction given to staff then. Councilmember Davis?
Yes, I just have a question. Attorney, does this have an implication moving forward based on what the policy is? Is there a policy? Because in this, I do agree that there is some vagueness in what do we do with this situation where time has passed, like the PwC situation. I definitely want clarity. I think every council member would want that, new and old, as to what is the policy. Is this a new precedent? Is the policy that someone can do something, add another item to the agenda as long as it meets the supermajority threshold? What is the policy for clarity? This is not something we've faced as new members. Yeah.
Okay. All right, I got you, Councilmember here.
Okay.
I just have a question.
Madam Attorney?
Yes, sir. Can you still hear me?
We can hear you.
Y'all making me pull out the book. You do have a ordinance provision 2-3, which states that once the agenda has been published, a 3/4 vote is required in order to add a amendment to the agenda. Add an item to the agenda. And that is a part of your ordinance.
Thank you, ma'am. That was my only question.
All right, Councilmember Hare.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. My only concern, and I've already shared this with the proposal of the motion. I was faced with this very thing, not with this particular council, but the previous council with the item, and my item didn't make it. It didn't really make it out of discussion just due to the fact that it was after Wednesday, and whatever work that the council, whatever work that staff needed to prepare and having that whatever the case was. And I think it was about swells. I wasn't allowed to move forward just due to the fact of what was just stated by, at least part of it, what was stated by the city attorney. So I have issue that, well, just sharing what took place when I tried to do the very same thing.
All right, yeah, so I think the key here is, and Madam Attorney, is there a policy that we have for council member requests? That's what makes this a little different. PwC gave
my hand was raised. Did anybody
Oh,
not see
I can't see you, no ma'am. All right.
when we do this on the chat where we raise our hand, does that not count?
It can't see your picture if your picture wasn't on there. So I'll have Brooke, because it's not visible on our end. So Brooke will tell us when you do like this. then I can.
It's also a visual raise.
So we don't use the feature that says raise hand or lower hand in Zoom.
Well, there was some inconsistency, so we can do whatever the council says, but if you do this, I can visually see that, but Brooke will track that. So I'll get you, but I did have a question. I got you, about council member request. I don't know if that's the clerk or Madam Attorney, is there anything in the policy book about that?
I don't think that it is specific to council member requests. It's just specific to adding an item to the agenda.
All right, Madam Councilmember Ingram.
Okay, so my question is specifically to city manager and city attorney. The biggest concern that I have, and I also stated it in the email that I sent, the biggest concern that I had about this was we had small group meetings. These small group meetings were not publicized, and where we were kind of taking, I guess, in some emails it said a vote of 9-1. However, for public knowledge, we didn't really follow, I guess, protocol or whatever. So my biggest concern was if we didn't announce those small group meetings to the public, I think this item should come before our work session to give an official consensus for staff direction to move forward. That's my biggest concern. And I just want something to come up later to where our public body felt that we were not operating within their best interest. This is a very important item that deals also with our budget and talks about asking our voters to vote on a bond. And I think we should move effectively and strategically and move smart about this and bring it back to our work session so we can follow what's necessary by our citizens. That's the perspective that I'm taking on this, and that is the biggest concern that I have on it. And also in our small group meetings, our city attorney was not present, and so these are the only things that I'm necessarily concerned about. And I do think as a council, we need to have this discussion together as a council.
So thank you, Councilmember Ingram, and just for clarity purposes, small group meetings where no formal or official action was taken. The city manager asked the council for direction as to whether staff resources will continue to prepare for a bond ask in the middle of this pandemic or not, with some hard dates coming up in the next several weeks. So I think just for clarity purposes for the record, council was not implying that any official action was taken. He asked for direction, which he does from time to time, with to get a consensus as to where his staff resources should go. So
And I understand that,
If the motion belongs to me, if I may, I have a comment after Ms. Ingram finishes. Go ahead, council member.
I guess what I'm saying, yes, city manager does have a right to ask.
Hold on, Ms. Ingram and Ms. Waddell. I'm chairing the meeting, and so I had acknowledged you, and I'll come back to you if you have a second round of comments. Councilmember Waddell, you have the floor, and then I'll come back.
Thank you.
You.
My comment is twofold. First off, I've heard reference being made to the item that was brought to the meeting, our prior meeting with PwC, in terms of it being placed on the agenda. I want to remind everybody as we're having this conversation that the urgency that was presented was that they had a deadline to meet, which was that Friday, and that's why it was being brought forward. With this conversation in terms of bonding, every direction that we gave in public meetings up to the point of the conversations that we had in the small group sessions, if you go back and refer back to the email that I sent out with the attachments of all of the different minutes from the meetings that we had from the work session and the special meeting, we had given staff direction to move forward with compiling the information so that they could back to this work session. We never gave any direction as a body for them not to do that. And so from where I stand, it's imperative for us to move forward with having a public conversation about whether we will continue with the public information that we had already put forward. And it's really not I hear council members asking for the policy to back it, but I don't remember when I raised a concern about the PWC issue being brought to the table last minute. And if you go back again and look at minutes, there are notes from a mayor pro tem meeting where, you know, it was referenced that a member in that meeting had been having conversations with individuals in Washington about that item. So it wasn't new news. It was just new to the council. This is not even new news to the body because we have discussed this collectively. We just haven't done so in a public way to let the public know where we each stand in terms of moving forward or not. And as I stated in my email, I'm not asking for anybody to change their position from the one that they stated in the small group meetings. I'm simply asking that you do what we've done all along in terms of governing as a public body and let your position be known publicly so that we can move forward and the people that we represent can know what our decision is. That's the only request that I have on the table right now. And I hope that in some way that has clarity to why I request right now.
Thank you. So Councilmember Wright, and just to remind you, Council, this is not pertaining to the merits of what we're talking about. This is whether this item can be added to tonight's meeting. So I just want to make sure we're clear. Tonight's discussion,
the attorney has already.
The motion on the floor that as I understand it, is for a supermajority or a vote on tonight's adding this to the agenda, right?
Correct, and the attorney has told us that's already.
So I just want to make sure they're clear because it seems like we're getting into the merits of it. This is just about approving the agenda with an additional item of 3.02. Councilmember Wright?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
And I was going to cover that, Mr. Mayor. This is just a request from a council member to put an item on the agenda tonight with a supermajority. If the item does not pass tonight, the council members still have an opportunity to come back to put it on a work session at the next work session. So I don't have a problem with that. I mean, that's the thing. So I think we're getting a little bit into the weeds instead of going ahead on taking the vote to see what the vote is going to be, and then we can move forward.
All right, so we do have a motion on the floor. It's been seconded by Councilmember Ingram. So council.
Mayor Colvin, I think that it would behoove us to make the statement that this is time sensitive. So to bring it back to a main work session would not be prudent because we have all been told that this is time sensitive and we needed to have a decision made by April the 14th.
The motion that you have on the floor is to add this item. And then if the item is added, then we'll add it to the list and we'll get into the merits of it. So I think at this time we'll call for question. Council, I'll call each one of you by name since the clerk is not here to see hands, and you can tell me your pleasure. So we'll start with District 1. Mayor Pro Tem Jensen, this is a vote in favor of adding, which is the motion. Yay or nay?
Red.
District 2, Councilmember Ingram, green or red?
Green.
District 3, Councilmember Waddell, green or red?
Green.
District 4, Councilmember Hare, green or red?
Red.
District 5, Councilmember Dawkins, green or red?
Red.
District 6, Councilmember Davis, green or red? Red. District 7, Councilmember Wright, green or red? District 7, Councilmember Wright, green or red?
Red.
District 8, Councilmember Banks McLaughlin, green or red?
Still trying to
Okay,
confirm.
Councilmember, District 9, Councilmember Kinston, green or red?
Green.
And Mayor, red. So
Thank you, council.
motion fails. Those voting in favor, Madam Clerk, I hope you hide it verbally. All right, item 4.01, COVID-19 update. Mr. Hewitt.
Yes, sir. Mayor, council members, Scott Bullard is on, and if we could switch him over. Scott, are you prepared?
Yes, sir. Good to go.
Go. Thank you.
Good evening, council. On this Monday, 6th day of April of 2020, We're 34 days in as a state to the current COVID crisis that we're dealing with at the moment. We've been under a state of emergency in the city now for 22 days, and the virus has been present in our vicinity and in the county and the city now for 18 days. From a case standpoint, the state's reporting 2,870 cases with 33 deaths across 89 counties. 48 of those are recorded in Cumberland County. As of today, the state's financial burn rate in this disaster is about $122.5 million. And in the city, we've only encumbered or expended about $10,000, but there'll be much more encumbrance as we move on. Just some quick items to make you aware of. A couple years ago, kind of lost in the noise after Florence and then taken up by Michael and Dorian's hurricanes, FEMA introduced what they call a lifeline status, where they take icons in about 7 different types. And that's what they base the health, welfare, and safety of a community on. So we adapted to that here in the city, and I'll just run through in stoplight fashion because that's how they're programmed. When lifelines are green, there's no problems. And we have no problems really right now with energy and hazardous materials, which are 2 of the 7. In fact, we're enjoying probably the best fuel prices in recent memory.
Yes, sir.
We also, though, then look at lifelines that we can say together are stable, but they've been impacted. For instance, safety and security. It's been impacted, but we have a good solid plan. We're doing virtual government like we are tonight, delivering services. And we've been creative in how we've kind of retooled the way we deliver some of our services. And we're watching things. We haven't been hit with large, widespread absenteeism as some services maybe on the West Coast have been hit with, but we're prepared for that because we have staffing plans in place. Another you might look at would be communications. There's broadband problems plaguing certain areas because they're testing things that, quite honestly, Council, have probably not been tested in proof of concept since Y2K 20 years ago. But as we learned 20 years ago, preparations and plans worked out then for something that might not have happened, but it paid collateral effects, and some of which are benefits that we're reaping today from a continuity of operations standpoint. My last green one that's stable but impacted would be transportation. Our city bus service ridership is down, and our airport is down as far as people flying. And that's a consequence of the social distancing and the stay-at-home orders. And we understand that. We also were informed today that Amtrak is discontinuing some of the Carolinian trains, and eventually they're going to completely shut down the line that runs New York to Miami for an undisclosed period of time. Again, all of these are green, so I'll transition to the last 2 that are yellow. Food, water, and shelter is one that is probably preeminent on our mind right now because with the overbuying of certain commodities and durable goods, it's created scarcities in our community and created a little bit of hysteria and fear to that end. Even though we've just got supply chain gaps, I would submit that we're not completely out, but we do watch carefully at how it affects hunger and things in the community that depended on philanthropic donations and other pass-alongs from where there was surplus to where right now some of those surpluses are not realized or they don't exist. Statewide, they're working on county feeding coordinators and at least appointing one in every county where we'll eventually come to a point to where we can do mass feeding, not unlike what some of you are used to in a hurricane setting. And finally, the one that is probably preeminent on most of our minds is the health and medical lifeline. We're concerned about it. It's yellow right now. The plans are holding. If you look at curve trends, and I'm very careful to say watch it with small data, but the curve trend for our county is very much the same shape of the one for the state of North Carolina. And things have not been rapidly escalating, even though the next 2 weeks are probably going to be a little shaky and a little different than anything we've ever experienced before. But with that being said, our hospital system is ready with a medical surge plan that is very sound, very robust. If you're to ride by Owen Drive right now, you'll see some tents sitting out front that they can triage with that actually come out of the search and rescue inventory and some of the medical assets of the state. So we're being creative how we put stuff together. I don't want to end on a sour note, but the sour note is still the personal protective equipment. The orders have been placed and things are starting to trickle in, and we have to get creative. There are homemade masks being made in the community. There's reuse of stuff that we're not used to reusing, but we're making do right now. And as you would be surprised, we've already started the recovery process. We've filed a request for public assistance, and we will be moving forward through the next couple paces, which will create an exploratory call and a meeting for recovery scoping among city staff, which is just a routine part of the process. But I just want you to realize the operational and response piece is far from over, but we're already looking at the sun coming up and working on what it'll take to get back to normal. I will stand subject to any questions you might have.
Are we unmuted? You're good, sir. Thank you, Mr. Bullitt. Council, do you see any council members' questions?
There are no hands.
Okay.
God bless.
Thank you, sir. Council, we need to approve the agenda. Just to stay legal, the printed agenda is printed, so need a motion to approve. There's a motion by Councilmember Davis, a second.
Is somebody working to get Courtney online?
You said, is she on?
Sorry, somebody working to get for Banks McLaughlin
I think she's on. I think she's on. She's on.
Second.
Okay, we got a second by Councilmember Kinston. All those in favor, I'll go down the line again. This is motion to approve the agenda. Mayor Pro Tem Jensen? No, we didn't motion.
Green.
Councilmember Ingram?
Green.
Councilmember Waddell?
Green.
Councilmember Dare?
Green, sir.
Councilmember Dawkins?
Green.
Who was that? She's nigga. Okay, Councilmember Davis? Councilmember Wright? Councilmember Wright?
Green.
Councilmember Banks McLaughlin?
Green.
Councilmember Kinston?
Green.
Mayor Green. All right, motion carried. So item 4.02, option to join Mid-Carolina government. Mr. Manager?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Tonight with us, we have Justin Henry. And Justin, if you could do an introduction to yourself and walk us through this item, please, sir.
All right.
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, good evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. It's good to be with y'all. I've got to say, this is the first time I've attended a council meeting like this, so this is quite interesting. I'd much rather be there with y'all, but just a little bit about myself and what we're trying to do at Mid-Carolina Council of Governments. I've been with the council since early December, so I'm new not only to Fayetteville, but also to the region. I came to Fayetteville from Asheville, and I'd served as the executive director of Land of Sky Regional Council in Asheville for the previous 7 years. And y'all may be aware of some of this, some of it you may not be aware of, but just sort of a quick history of what is going on with the council and what brought me to join the team at Mid-Carolina. About 1.5 years or 2 years ago, the council leadership began going through the process of evaluating the value of the regional council for the member governments in our 3 counties, which are Harnett, Cumberland, Sampson counties, and the municipalities in those counties. And quite frankly, the purpose for that evaluation, and in terms of questioning the value, was to determine if the regional council was going to move forward as an organization or not. if the council was going to, each county would choose to merge with another regional council, one of the neighbors, or all 3 counties and the municipalities would move into another council collectively. And that was all on the table. And a consulting firm was hired and did a very comprehensive analysis and study of the services, not only the levels of services that were provided by Mid-Carolina, but I think more importantly, the types of services and the types of organizations that exist around the state with other regional councils. So that's kind of when I came into the picture. One of the first steps that the board of directors took was to begin the process of recruiting and hiring a new executive director. And so that happened in December, and I came on board, and as I was going through the recruitment and selection process, it became very clear to me that I was being hired basically to do one job, and that was to rebuild Mid-Carolina Council of Governments. And quite frankly, I saw that as a great opportunity. I think at my point in my career, it's very rare that you have an opportunity to really build an organization more or less from the ground up. My background's been in city and county management prior to getting into regional government. So this was a great opportunity. And there's both some personal and professional reasons that I accepted the position and moved down to be with y'all and join the Mid-Carolina team. And since then, and this is included in your agenda packet, some information that we've included in there. And I'm not going to go through all those things in detail because I know y'all have a lot more pressing issues that you're dealing with right now, quite frankly, than membership in the regional council. But I really appreciate the opportunity that you're giving me to meet with y'all during this work session. But what we're focusing on, and it's what I included in the packet, was kind of what our work plan is or has been for the short period of time that I've been here. And the 4 key items that we're focusing on are engagement. We're building relationships. I've been out all over the region. I found out how long it takes to drive from Lillington to Turkey and from Clinton up to Dunn and all over the place. But what I'm trying to do is develop relationships that in the long term can build trust, that I can earn your trust to be a partner when we're looking at regional issues and specific issues that may assist your local government or the city. That leads into the second item that we're looking at are services, in terms of how do we build core levels of services that we're able to deliver to our member governments. And some of those may fall under a broad umbrella. And for instance, a minute ago, broadband was mentioned. Maybe there's issues like broadband or housing or issues that are facing all 3 counties that are tackled on a regional level. The other side of that is there could be specific projects that just specific member governments need to do. And part of that is I've worked with one of your assistant managers, Angel, trying to develop a proposal to look at some options that we could provide some assistance with affordable housing study and inventory, and going through that plan in terms of being able to leverage some partnerships we have with Triangle J Council of Governments up in Raleigh. The third thing, and this is very clear to me, is we're going to need to build capacity internally in the organization. This is something we're moving fairly slow with from the standpoint of not getting too far ahead of ourselves. I'm not quite sure yet that the capacity that we end up moving forward with at Mid-Carolina will look like what the capacity of other regional councils in the state have. We may rely on more partnerships, both partnerships with the public sector and our private sector partners, as opposed to really ramping up and trying to find ways to really grow our staff from the standpoint of capacity. And then finally, the fourth thing is accountability. being accountable to our member governments in terms of delivering on the promises and, more importantly, the needs that our member government have, understanding that the member governments are the ones that really need to set our work plan long term, help us identify where the capacity gaps are, what sort of both regional and specific projects do we have that we need to tackle and move forward. So that is the work plan. That's what we've been working on doing. And then 3-4 weeks ago, y'all know what happened. That's why we're all on this Zoom conference right now. And the world has changed for all of us. And I know I'm not telling you anything you don't know. It's changed for us as an organization. And what I see moving forward, quite frankly, is obviously we're going to move forward with these priorities. But I think you're going to see a lot of our focus over probably the next several years shift to the recovery from this pandemic that we're dealing with. And the only thing that I have experience with that I can compare to this, and that's certainly not on the same scale, but if you remember when President Obama enacted the recovery funds during the last recession, we administered a lot of programs and those funds through Land of Sky, and we were really ramping up our capacity and our ability to deliver services during that. I think we're going to see the same sort of thing with this in terms of the need for delivering services and drawing down money to the regional level for whether it be grant programs, loan programs, just specific programs. So, you know, in saying what I laid out with the work plan, that's obviously in flux, like everything is right now. I did provide city staff with an option if the city were to make the decision that you would like to examine joining the council. That option is laid out in your agenda packet, and it covers a 3-year period where membership dues are phased in. By no means is that the only option. Is that the only thing that's on the table? That was just an idea that, as I was looking at, that we had come up with. And I'll tell you what I told Doug and Christoph when we had lunch, I don't know, it was probably about 2 months ago, I guess, is that would I like and would the council like Fayetteville to be a member of the council? Absolutely. There is no doubt that the city is the urban core of this region, is the economic driver of this region. And we think it's important that y'all have a seat at the table as we move forward and build the regional council into what we want it to become. But in saying that, I'm not here tonight asking y'all for any money or to make a decision immediately in terms of joining the council. But what I will do, and what I've been trying to do, particularly working with your staff, is to interact and treat your staff in the city just like you are a member now, and continue to move forward with that. And again, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I'll be glad to answer any questions. I know that was a pretty quick, and I do appreciate y'all giving me time on the agenda tonight, Mr. Mayor.
Are there other questions, Brooke? Yeah, you're on mute now. Okay. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Okay.
Did have a question. I'll come to you. I got you, Councilmember Harris. So, the board representation of your members, will it be proportional to the amount that's paid? So, in other words, we pay according to what, population? Is that how you determine the annual cost?
Yes, sir. That's true. It's a per capita amount, and what the proposal was, it was included in the packet. And again, that's not the only one. The way that our board of directors is currently structured now is there's a representative from each county. So each county commission appoints a member to serve on the board of directors. And then all the municipalities in each county caucus and elect a representative to serve on the council. So there's 6 members of the board of directors. What I would propose through that, and what I would advocate to the board of directors, particularly considering the city's population and the amount that, based on our current due structure, you would be paying, that the city would have also a member on the board of directors. And again, I say that's the way it's structured now, because one of the things that is recommended is a list of recommendations that came from the consultants, and we're looking at this too, is a review of bylaws and the governing structure. You know, and I will say what my feeling about that is, and the reason that recommendation was made was not to pull back or reduce the amount of representation on the governing board of the Council of Governments, but to increase that, to make sure that there is a very good cross section of representation of the region, not only from the standpoint of population, but urban and rural and really everything involved with that. Yes, sir.
Thank you. And the last question I had, are there any larger cities that are members of COGS, like our municipal peers in other areas that you're familiar with?
There are. When I was at Land of Sky, our largest jurisdiction was the city of Asheville. The city of Asheville was a member and had our board was structured differently up there, and they had representation on our governing board. And most other jurisdictions, for instance, Triangle J, I think the city of Raleigh's a member, Charlotte's a member of Centralina Council of Governments down in that region. But yes, across the state, the majority of the larger jurisdictions are members of COGS. I think what you see with that, and at least with my experience in Asheville, was although we delivered services across the region that impacted each jurisdiction, we had specific relationships with the city of Asheville just because their needs were different. They had much more staffing capacity than a lot of the smaller municipalities had, obviously. So we did a lot more specific work with them around some of the specific things were transportation, housing. We did some stuff with some urban design and walkability projects that were more specifically related to Asheville. Obviously, we would have done those for any other jurisdiction too, but those were the specific needs that Asheville had and how we were able to tailor those needs based on what their size and their capacity was from a staffing perspective.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Hare.
Thanks, Mayor, and thank you, sir, for your presentation.
Yes, sir.
I guess I'm a little bit, Mayor and Council, not really catching what the card really does. As he was speaking, I was thinking, well, is he saying he's doing some form of lobbying on behalf of us and whatever other cities are part of the group, and as far as going out getting resources or whatever the case may be, even today for what we're dealing with, that they would be a part of helping us to improve resources and things along that line. That's what I'm understanding what you're saying, sir?
Yes, sir. And it's, a lot of times I laugh because my mother still can't explain to people what I do for a living. And quite frankly, I have a hard time doing that too sometimes. But we have a lot of different tentacles. But one of the areas, and I didn't mention this, that we house the Area Agency on Aging. So those are basically all the federal funds that flow through the Older Americans Act, and we administer those programs. That has traditionally in Fayetteville been the one thing that Mid-Carolina COG has done and done very well.
Now, what they've done that? They've gone out to get the resources or apply for resources on our behalf?
They have, yes, sir. And when I say that they have, what has happened is the state, North Carolina, has designated each regional council as the lead regional entity for each aging program across the state. So that's been a relationship that has gone on for years. And when you start looking at other areas, what other regional councils do well that quite frankly we're not doing very well here is exactly what you said. Identifying what are the main issues facing our region as a whole that we can team up, potentially find funds, develop projects. And a lot of times it's easier for me maybe to give you an example of what I'm talking about. For instance, much like this region, we had some real challenges with broadband accessibility in the Asheville region. We were Buncombe, Madison, Transylvania, and Henderson County. So we had some pretty urbanized areas. We had some very rural areas. We were able to pull a coalition of those local governments together and develop a plan that in the model that we use there to introduce or to encourage increased competition in the broadband market to hopefully drive prices down and expand services. And through that process, we were able to get 2 new service providers in. We were able to get some of the incumbent providers to come to the table. And that is actually an ongoing coalition that continues to meet and work. That's just a small example.
Thank you, sir.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you. But are you saying that you are somewhat like even though we're membership, you're saying you're somewhat like a lobbyist group?
We can. We also do that as well. We can't specifically lobby directly because under general statutes, we are a unit of local government. But
okay.
what we can do is advocate with the
yeah.
Yes,
My only concern was I thought, Mayor, and Council, that we had a number of agencies and groups already involved that kind of do certain things like this for us. And would this being a membership here meaning, would it be meaning that we would be doing some form of duplicating the same resources that we're already sending out? But thank you, Council. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Questions, bro? Good. All right, Council. So,
Mr. Mayor,
yes, sir.
I have a question to the gentleman. And it's along the lines of council member here, but in the this legislative text, it says here in the background to study regional governmental problems, including matters affecting health, safety, welfare, education, recreation, economic conditions, regional planning, and regional development. And so my question is, and I'm trying to get at the effectiveness of the COG, because you're talking about, and help me understand this, with the different municipalities across Cumberland County. How big is your organization? How many staff do you have in the essence to tackle those areas? And I'm sure there are many more that you have talked about. How effective can you be? And I heard you say about, first year we pay so much, second year, and then the third year we're paying around, I believe, 43 grand for your services. Along with all the other municipalities that you are impacting. And so my concern is, would you be effective to be able to impact those areas that we have need of? Because, of course, we're the 6th largest city in the state. And how can you, if there is any guarantees, would be effective to help us to reach some of the goals that we need to reach going forward? And based upon your presentation, I'm not really feeling that, you're ready to do that out of the gate, unless you're saying that you want to grow with us. Can you help me to understand where you are right now? You're saying you were hired to rebuild the organization.
Mr. Wright, this is Doug. If I can jump in real quick before Justin does. One of the goals that we had was to introduce the COG to the council members. When I came in 2004, the city had not been a member of the COG for some time. And because of that, and as Justin alluded to, the COG over time became an agency that really didn't have a lot of direction. And so if you talk about the value of the COG, it becomes very difficult to identify what that would be because it has not been an effective council of government, and we've not been a member for many, many years. What you see in your agenda package that is a 3-year proposal is negotiable. If that is something that the council and the city found of value. But looking at the issues that are on the table that they can do, a council of government can do any function that a local government can do. They can administer that for you. And so one of the areas that Angel and I had asked Justin to look into was how other COGs across the state have been successful in helping their municipalities, deal with issues just like the ones you talked about. And so in the Triangle J COG, which is Raleigh, they're actually developing an affordable housing strategy for the city of Raleigh that would encompass Raleigh as well as all of their housing partners. And we've asked Justin to get us that contract. So we could, whether we're a member or not, we would hopefully be able to contract with the COG for additional benefits and services. But when we look at the next 2 items on your agenda, which one is MSA expansion and the other is also homelessness, both of those are also areas that the COG could provide a resource. But as Justin said, because we have such a strong planning function here, because in comparison to smaller towns like Falcon or Godwin or other places, we may not need that level of assistance. But a functioning COG is one of those areas that is a benefit to the city in some form or fashion. So whether or not we do a full proposal, partial proposal or not, they are in the area, they are getting reconstituted, and Justin was recruited because of his experience in it. And so we're all learning how to do this Zoom technology tonight, and this may not be the most effective way to do it because the most effective way to tell a story is to give an example of where it's been successful somewhere else. And just the platform that we have tonight, Justin is unable to really walk you through, as he could if he were in person, what the COG in Asheville did and how they benefited the surrounding area. Again, we don't have a model here, but this was, as the mayor said, was on for discussion tonight only, to do an introduction to council and to gain and solicit your feedback. And then as we move forward with the budget development, if council's so inclined, that'll be something we can bring back and discuss with you as well.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Any more questions? Any other kind of questions, council?
Mayor Pro Tem.
Oh, Rep. Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So basically, the city manager said everything that I was getting ready to say. I think that we all have heard that the COG was not functioning the way it should have, and that they have got a new director and everything is negotiable on what they've brought to us. I really don't think that we should.
Oh, she muted herself, it looks like.
Mayor Pro Tem, you're mute. You gotta repeat it.
She's gone.
Oh,
Hold on, no, she's back. Mayor Pro Tem?
I'm back on.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem, you have to repeat that.
Back on.
Dawkins. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so basically, can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so basically at the end of it, I said, it has shown to be successful in other parts of the state, and I think that we need to keep on researching that and don't close the door on it, my opinion. So I'm done. I'm done now.
Thank you. Councilmember Dawkins, did you have a question?
No, sir. No, sir.
All right. All right. Well, council, if there are no other questions, we will receive the report and just keep moving. No action needed, right?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council.
Right. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Yes, sir.
Item 4.03, Mr. Manning?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This item will start with Economic and Community Development Director Cindy Block, who's on as well as she's going to introduce our consultant who will run through the presentation. Cindy?
Sure.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, yes, hello, Mayor, City Manager, members of council. Tonight we are, we have our consultants with Urban Design Ventures. Carl Hagland is here to make a presentation to council. What this is every 5 years, the city is required to update our consolidated plan for the Community Development Block Grant, or CDBG, as well as our Home Investment Partnership Grant, also known as HOME. So what the consultant is going to share with you is the proposed 2020 through 2024 consolidated plan, the 2020 through 2021 annual action plan, the neighborhood revitalization strategic area, also known as NRSA. He'll also be going over the benefits of that. We have a substantial amendment to our 2019 through 2020 plan. And the consultants also did an impediments to fair housing analysis that will also be included in the presentation. So this is for presentation purposes only, and information and Q&A. This item will come back to council at the April 27th meeting for final approval. Within that time frame, you are open to make recommended changes, additions, deletions, etc. So I'm going to turn it over now to Urban Design Ventures, and as I'm not sure if it's Walt or Carl that's on the call.
Hello?
Yes, sir, we can hear you. Hey, Carl.
Okay. My name is Walt Haglund, and I'm the president of Urban Design Ventures. Want to talk about the, as Cindy said, the 5-year plan, the annual action plan, the AI, and most importantly these days is an NRSA for the Murchison Road corridor. Can everybody see the slides?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Now, in order to participate in the federal Community Development Block Grant Program, the Home Investment Partnership Program, the city must, as all the other entitlements, prepare what's known as a 5-year consolidated plan. And with that, the city will receive funds for the next 5 years, known as their annual action plans.
I think they control the slides.
Oh, you can control the slides? Can we do the next slide? Okay, so that the 5-year plan is basically designed to help cities and states and local jurisdictions, to deal with affordable housing and community development needs, and what are the best use of their funds over a 5-year period. The next slide. Now, part of that is the annual action plan. Next slide. So that over the 5-year period, each year the city will receive a allocation from HUD for CDBG and for its home funds. And under that action plan, the city then decides what priorities and needs and goals it should use those funds for. Now, we've developed in cooperation with the city staff a series of goals and strategies for your presentation. Now, these include general housing strategy, home ownership assistance, new housing construction, housing rehabilitation, fair housing, housing education, and rental assistance. So this covers the gamut of the housing needs. Plus also you have to address the homeless strategy. The housing needs, operations and support, homeless prevention, permanent supportive housing, and then shelter housing. Then there's other special needs. This is your needs for persons who have disability, for the elderly, or specific segments of your population. Their housing, their social service needs, and accessibility. In order to make accessibility improvements to their housing and so they can live in place. Then the overall community development strategy consists of clearance, demolition of slums and blighted property, community facilities, public services, and public transportation. In addition, infrastructure improvements to rehabilitation and reconstruction of streets, curbs, walks, removal of architectural barriers from public and community facilities, public safety, improve public safety and upgrades to the facilities, purchase equipment, crime prevention, community policing, etc. And lastly, revitalization, promote and assist in the stabilization of residential neighborhoods, removing slums. And in this case, the city also wants to designate an NRSA project area. Now, there's also an economic development strategy that's needed to talk about employment, support and encourage job creation. Financial assistance, this is going to be even more important with the new money coming out of the federal government to provide loans to businesses to get them restarted. The Small Business Assistance Program to support and encourage that growth, financial incentives to support new economic development, and the development program to plan and promote development and reuse of vacant commercial and industrial sites in the city. Then the last one is your administration, your planning, your management strategy. The overall management to provide sound and professional planning, continue to develop and plan for special studies, your environmental clearance for housing, your NRSA plan, to prepare a neighborhood revitalization strategy area plan for Murchison Road corridor. And lastly, the city is also interested to prepare and submit an application for funding under the Choice Neighborhood Program. By developing the NRSA in the Murchison Road area, we're able to then easily transition to the Choice Neighborhood Initiative and to get the money to develop a full plan and ways to improve that neighborhood and to bring it back to the prosperity that it once had. Now, as Cindy mentioned, there's an analysis of impediments to fair housing choice. This is to look at the various state, local government, your ordinances, your statutes, administrative policies, etc., and what are areas where you can improve housing for people, housing choice for people who have the same economic condition. And the analysis is an assessment of these statutes and policies, etc. Now, there's some identified potential impediments, and the first one is fair housing education and outreach. There's always a continuing need to educate people about their rights under the Fair Housing Act and to improve the public and officials' knowledge and awareness of the fair housing laws, regulations, and requirements. And our strategies to deal with this to continue to promote fair housing awareness, continue to prepare and distribute literature and informational materials, to educate residents that they have the right to live outside concentrated areas, to work with the local board of realtors to educate and promote fair housing, strive for better intergovernmental cooperation between state and local partners, and to publish forms, information material, etc., in both English and Spanish. As our minority population, the Hispanic, Latino population increases, we need to also publish forms and information material in both English and Spanish. Then the quality of rental housing versus affordability. The city of Fayette and Cumberland County have a large supply of rental housing, but they do not meet the minimum property standards. And almost 36% of all houses in households in the city and county are cost overburdened by more than 30% of their monthly income on housing. So the goal is then to increase the supply of decent, safe, sound, and affordable housing. Our strategies would be provide funding and incentive for the rehabilitation of rental housing, continue to enforce your local codes and ordinances, to develop maybe a rental registry program, to promote and encourage the Public Housing Authority to offer Section 8 voucher holders the option to convert to home ownership, continue to support low-income housing tax credit projects, and target and rehabilitate rental housing in the Murchison Road corridor, Shaw Heights corridor in adjacent Cumberland County. Lack of affordable homeownership housing. There's a lack of housing resources for low and moderate income person to purchase a home. Many homes are available for purchase, but they're in need of substantial rehabilitation. So the goal is then to increase the supply of various types of affordable housing for sale, construction, and rehabilitation activities. Our strategies would then be to provide financial support and assist low and moderate income households to purchase houses at affordable prices throughout the city and Cumberland County. Support and promote the development of affordable infill housing. Continue to fund and support homeowner rehab and emergency rehab. Provide financial and development incentives to private developers to construct and rehabilitate. To encourage and promote the development, construction, and rehabilitation of lower income housing in areas that are not low moderate income. Target and rehab homeownership occupied housing in the Murchison Road and Shaw Heights neighborhood areas. Continuing need for accessible housing. You know, as an older built up environment, there's a lack of accessible housing in the city and in the county. 21.9% of the housing units in the county were built over 60 years ago, and they do not have accessibility features. Our goal is to increase the number of accessible units for the physically disabled and developmentally delayed persons through new construction and rehab. Our strategies then will be promote programs to increase the amount of accessible housing through rehab of existing housing stock, encourage the development and new construction of accessible and visible housing, continue to enforce the Americans with Disability Act and the fair housing requirements for landlords to make accommodation for tenants who are disabled, to continue to promote programs to assist elderly homeowners with accessibility improvements in their property so they can remain in their own homes. The fifth one would be economic issues affecting housing choice. There's a lack of economic opportunities in the city and the county, which prevents low-income households from increasing their financial resources and the ability to live outside areas of concentrated poverty. The local economy will continue to improve by providing new job opportunities and increased household income to promote fair housing choice. Our strategies then would be to strengthen partnerships that enhance local businesses, support and enhance workforce development, continue to support programming that enhances entrepreneurship, continue to promote and encourage economic development with local industries, support and enhance entrepreneurship, training programs with a particular program to assist women, minority, and veteran-owned businesses. Impacted areas of concentration. There are specific high poverty, racially segregated areas throughout the city of Fayetteville and also in the county, where the concentration of low income minority persons exceeds the area's corresponding population. And the goal is to promote the deconcentration of minorities outside of the central and northern parts of the city of Fayette. Our strategies then would be to support, promote, and plan for affordable housing development outside areas of concentration. Market and promote housing opportunities for minorities, and to provide assistance to minority households to locate their residences outside areas of minority concentration. Now, the Neighborhood Revitalization Strategy Area, the NRSA, is a specific program that HUD has that you designate areas, targeted areas for revitalization. And the NRSA is different from other target areas in that with it you have enhanced flexibility in undertaking development, housing, and public service activities with your CDBG funds. Now, job creation or retention effort is focused on selective neighborhoods. The aggregation of housing units for which CDB funds are obligated during each program year is treated as a single structure. So in this case, you may have 11 houses that you want to rehab. Now, of those 11 houses, 6 of those would be low mod and 5 of them could be above income. So therefore, you're not just concentrating your effort on just low income, but you're also helping the middle income and moderate income people to be able to adjust their houses so that the whole neighborhood grows up, not just specific areas. And also then economic activities may be excluded from the public benefit standards, which means that you don't have to worry about job creation for low moderate income people. that what you're doing is you're creating new economic activities to increase employment in that area, and so that you can bring in higher income paying jobs. Now, the target areas, the NRSA that we're proposing consists of 2 census tract 10 and 11, and block groups 1 and 2, and 2 and 3. The area is basically bounded in the north by Parmalee Drive, Greensboro Road, and Cross Creek, and goes all the way down to Edgecombe Road and the Filter Plant Drive. And then on the west, you have Little Cross Creek. And right through the middle is Murchison Road. Now, this traditionally was a very stable neighborhood, but it's lost its commercial vibe, and you have assets there. You have good, solid housing. You have the university there, and you have so much going for this area that it would be a benefit under the NRSA that the area could be revitalized. Now, HUD requires that the NRSA area be predominantly residential. You have the next slide. And you have to look that at least 51% of the area has to be residential. The yellow is residential. And as you can see that I believe it's close to 70% of the area covered is residential. The red represents commercial. The light blue is semi-public, which is your churches and your university. The dark blue is your public. You have wonderful assets there. You have the school. You have the community center there. These are assets that help build that and strengthen that neighborhood. And also it's an area that is basically defined geographically and geologically by the 2 creeks. Next. So the existing land use, actually it's 80% of the parcels, or about 70% of the land use is residential. And only 70 parcels, or 2.6% are commercial, and undeveloped vacant land is like 11.5%. So you have another opportunity there to develop that undeveloped land, that vacant land, into new commercial development. Structural conditions. We looked at the structural conditions in the area, and majority of the next slide, the majority of the property is in sound condition, 57.8%. This is an area that is very stable still. But you look at what's happening. Minor rehabilitation is almost 29%. Major rehabilitation, 12.2%. And economically infeasible to rehab, you have about 24 structures that really need to come down and be demolished. So our goals then, what do we do with the NRSA? We remove substandard structures. We formalize a partnership with Fayetteville State University. We utilize homeownership programs to expand homeownership opportunities. We promote mixed income housing development. We assemble sites for additional commercial and light industrial development. We improve the appearance of the commercial businesses through business facade program, rehabilitation program. And we promote homeownership in the Murchison Road corridor through housing counseling programs and home buyer programs. We form a partnership with the Indian Housing Authority to address the rehabilitation of the Elliott Circle development. We continue to rehabilitate owner-occupied housing in Broadell and Eccles Park. We rehabilitate renter-occupied housing throughout the NRSA. We continue the city's code enforcement program, increase police patrols and community policing. We develop a summer job training program for area youth. We apply for a Section 108 loan to develop the Murchison Road corridor. I specifically talked to the mayor about this possibility, and it exists where the city borrows against its future CDBG dollars to provide low-interest loans at long-term at 20 years to help major development in the Murchison Road corridor. And the most important thing is we apply for the Choice Neighborhood Initiative for the Murchison Road corridor. We've done the background information so we're able to move forward. So long-term goals would be to continue the acquisition and relocation, revitalize vacant and underutilized commercial, ensure the continued preservation of the existing housing stock, reconstruct streets, sidewalks, curbs, provide information and refer Murchison Road NRSA residents to employment training programs, create commercial development marketed towards students of Fayetteville State University, and utilize, most importantly, Fayetteville State University to help retrain or train residents in the Murchison Road corridor to be able to get higher skilled paying jobs. We decrease the school dropout rate for men and women. We assist the 18 to 35-year-olds to obtain their GED. We create dense multifamily affordable housing using the 108 loan program. We recruit banks, pharmacies, and a drugstore to the Murchison Road corridor. We continue to promote and market the business facade rebate program. We create a revolving loan program towards the Murchison Road corridor. We promote home occupations and development of small business enterprise. And we develop a loan pool with local banks with bank funds to match federal and state funds. Now, the measurable outcomes. HUD asks, okay, what are your measurable outcomes? So we're looking at to rehabilitate 25 owner-occupied homes per year for a total over the 5-year period of 125 homes. Rehabilitate 100 renter-occupied units. Demolish at least 15 structures per year for maybe up to a total of 75. Clean up 10 vacant lots per year. Reconstruct the main streets in the area, 1 street per year for a total of 5. Installation of handicap ramps on reconstructed streets. Let's make the Murchison Road area a walkable neighborhood again. And we want to talk about new housing development, increase home ownership opportunities for 45 low to moderate income houses, increase home ownership opportunities for 5 above income families, identification of potential home buyer counseling services, construction of 5 new single family homes by housing partners, and assist in the development of a CBDO, which is a community-based development organization to help development in the NRSA. Public safety improvements, formation of a block watch, crime watch organization, assignment of a police patrol car to the corridor, decrease in crime statistics. We want to have citizen involvement, distribution of informational material, organize citizen meetings, promote the formation of a task force for participation for housing, public safety, and public relations. Interagency cooperation, support the formation and joint ventures between nonprofits and private developers, assemble sites to build new houses and purchase existing houses for rehab and resale, partner with NC Works and the Center for Economic Empowerment and Development and Pathway for Prosperity to bring job training to the area. Continue with the city code enforcement program on a systematic block by block basis and develop demolition of 15 vacant structures per year. We want to assemble sites for new economic development, promote the business facade program, provide economic incentives, and create 150 new job opportunities in the NRSA. Now, I know I gave you a lot. There's a lot of work. We've been working on this for a long time. The city staff has been most cooperative and helpful. I can't tell you how much Cindy and her staff has really contributed to this process. And we're very much interested in continuing forward with this, and we appreciate your input for this project.
I like it. I like it.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, sir. And certainly, Council, if you have any questions, kind of. Okay. So, Councilmember Dawkins. All right. Councilmember Dawkins and Ingram.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to ask the gentleman if he has any, or can he give me names of cities where he has experience in working with them, cities in the 250,000 population, especially any cities that are considered to be military towns like Fayetteville. Thank you.
Councilman, we haven't worked in any cities that are military towns like Fayetteville. However, we've done this same process in the city of East Chicago. We've done this in McKeesport, Pennsylvania. We've done this in the city of Jeanette, Pennsylvania, and the city of Pittsburgh. What we've found is that by concentrating this to get in an area, you're bringing planning, you're bringing your resources, etc., so that you can make a difference. You got to look at why Murchison Road corridor. It's the main access into Fort Bragg. You know, it's an area that's stable, but it's an area in need of improvement. it's not too far gone that it has to be cleared. It needs help. And you have the fabulous resource of a school, a recreation center there, and you have FSU. I mean, those together really build a community, and we can work on that. Plus the fact that by starting with the NRSA, we're able to go into the Choice Neighborhood Program. Now the city wants to file an application for planning assistance. Now that would be like $100 million total that they could get over a 5-year period and be able to do some real improvements to that area. We're not talking about nickels and dimes, we're talking about big bucks. You know, and with what's going on with the federal government now and the $2.2 trillion and what HUD's going to be throwing out there, the city of Fayette is really at the crossroads, and you are ready to pounce on HUD, believe it or not, and that you will have your ducks in a row, that you'll be able to move forward and not have to wait for HUD to catch up with you.
All right. Well, that I appreciate it. I've lived here all my life, and I really hate that term that we're ready to pounce or we're on the cusp of greatness or whatever. But I really like what I've heard from you, and I guess we just got to see how much it's going to cost, and then we just got to go find the money, because I'm in agreement with Councilmember Hare. I really, really like what I'm hearing. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir. All right, Councilmember Ingram, I got you, Councilmember Wright. Councilmember Ingram, Hare, and then Wright.
Thank you. So one of the concerns I was going to ask about was the cost, but I'll go to my next piece. Touched on fair housing and those choices, and looking at affordable home ownership. Can you speak a little bit more to me about how that could be more achieved? And you also talked about rehabilitating homes. I think I saw 25 homes per year. And would this be like based on a grant system?
What you can do is you design the program to meet the economic needs of the family. And you can have a grant program, you can have a low interest loan program, but what a lot of communities do, and I found this to be the most effective, is you have what's known as an earn grant program, so that you provide money over a period of years and that person lives in that house, and that has to be their main residence. So therefore they're earning it because they're living in the house, and they're maintaining and keeping that house. So we find that the most cost effective is to rehabilitate existing housing, because you can get more bang for your buck by rehabilitating an existing house than to start from scratch with new construction. And you have lots of houses in that area that are in need of rehabilitation. You figure a lot of them were built in the 50s, you know, and that's now what, 70 years old. So, you know, I mean, they're almost as old as me, you know?
Okay, and then my next piece was, you mentioned about, you talked about our university.
Yes.
And did I hear you mention expanding?
No, I didn't mention the expansion of the university. I mentioned what you need to do is to sit down and have a partnership and a dialogue with the university. That's a major employer. It's a major, you know, factor in your city, and it's a positive thing. And you have to have that dialogue so that you keep them in the loop, they keep you in the loop. So if they talk about expansion, you know exactly what they're talking about, you know, and I think that's what the important thing is. You have to be a partner with them in the redevelopment and revitalization of the Murchison Road corridor.
Okay, thank you, sir. And city manager, is there more to this presentation? Are we getting ready to go more into depth with other things that was a part of this packet, or we're just hearing from him tonight?
Tonight it is for you guys to hear from him, take a look at the various documents were attached here, and then on the 27th, barring any additional edits or deletions that you might have, we would be bringing this to council for your approval on April 27th.
Okay, well, let me go ahead and get this question out of the way too. B Street, I know that is that corridor that came out of the a strategic plan some years ago. However, I am questioning where are we at now with B Street at a financial perspective, economically moving that along.
Okay, we looked at B Street along with Murchison Road. And B Street is not an NRSA area. It's an area that's in need of major redevelopment. It's an area that's in need of a lot of financial resources. And it's an area that is not the same criteria as the Murchison Road for an NRSA. However, the city, I know, is committed, the city staff is committed to working with B Street and to doing that area and redoing that. And that's part of this whole ongoing planning process over the next 5 years. The city is not just focusing into one area, but the city is looking, the city community development staff and planning are looking at several areas, and B Street's one of them, so that they will be able to address the future needs there.
Thank you.
B Street needs more planning work than Murchison Road right now.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Ingram. Councilmember Hare.
Thank you so much.
I don't really have anything else to say, Mayor. My little fun joke about the motion was speaking how I feel about the item.
Okay. Councilmember Wright.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I like the long-range plan, and we're looking at 2024, and I like all the ideas. My question is based upon the grant amount. How realistic can these things be initiated in 5 years? Are we planning out farther than 5 years, or are we looking at encompassing this plan within the 5-year track? That's my first question.
Overall 5-year plan for the city.
I'm sorry?
Are you talking about the overall 5-year plan for the city, or are you talking about the NRSA for Murchison Road?
I'm talking about the 5-year plan for the city, but the NRS for Murchison Road, of course, that too. But all these combined in the same 5 years.
Okay. I don't know if you're aware, but HUD has been now charged with releasing $2 billion more in CDBG money for emergency purposes, and also another $2 million for other CDBG. So they're going to be increasing the city's annual allocation. So, and
yeah,
we're
I'm
talking
aware of that, but that's for emergencies, if I'm not mistaken.
It's to rebuild the economy, and an area like Murchison Road is an area where you'll be rebuilding the economy and the housing. We're talking about people that are going to be needing financial assistance to get started with a house, or people that may tend to lose houses or go into foreclosure, etc., and you'll have money to help them. And so that's what we're looking at, is that, if you have a 5-year plan and you have all of those elements to provide financing, to provide rehabilitation, to provide new construction, etc., so that, and when you say then that the federal government is having these programs roll out, you are ready. You know what the needs are in your city. You know what the needs are in Murchison Road. And then you're able to go after that money, and that you can hit the ground running, because you know what those are already, and you have your plan and your strategy out. So we're not talking about adding more money from the city. We're talking about utilizing the federal and state funds that are going to be available, along with your annual appropriations.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll go briefly to Councilmember Ingram and then City Manager.
Really quickly, you mentioned something that I did want to ask, because what I find a lot of times is once we start to have these conversations with the citizens, they tend to get a little confused with who's bringing information to them. So I think right now it's probably about 5 different organizations coming in to talk about developing the Murchison Road corridor area. Cindy or Mr. Walter or city manager, is there any way that all of these organizations can be, I guess, vetted through our economic development department, so that it's kind of looking like it's coming from a central source?
Well, I think everything is going through Cynthia and her department, so that we're doing work that's going through her. The economic development consultants for the university, et cetera, are going through her, so that she and her staff are basically the synthesizer. They have all the information. They're able to share information between us, and they've shared information already with us, and we're sharing information with them, so that it's one overall approach that the city department is taking.
So thank you.
Thank you.
And Councilmember Ingram, I think kind of this would be a
Thank you.
this would be a good way to look at it, is that you have the opportunity zone folks who you're probably thinking of. You have the urban planners, and then these guys are the community development piece to hit more of the neighborhood stuff. So he may not know about all that.
Mr. Mayor, I have a round 2
That's the
question.
ones I was thinking of. Thank you.
Okay, all right, Councilman Wright.
Yes, sir. In your presentation, sir, you mentioned about P4P, and a light bulb went on in my head with that, as far as what role can P4P play? And you mentioned some things about jobs and things of that nature. How familiar are you with the strategies and plans for P4P, and how can they impact this this agenda?
We met with them as part of our series of roundtable discussions. We talked to them, and they are interested in participating with the overall workforce development and encouragement, et cetera, and that they would be part of the team. So, and an active player. We lost the sound.
All right, City, Mr. Manager.
Yes, I'm going to ask Cindy, if you are listening, to just kind of close. I shared with the group, we're bringing it back on the 27th. Thank you, Walter, for your presentation. But Cindy, if you could close us out.
Yes, so tonight's meeting was to introduce to you the NRSA, the 5-year consolidated plan, annual action plan, and impediments to fair housing. So it's your opportunity to review all those plans before you give a final approval for us to submit these plans to HUD. So this is for informational purposes. We will be back on the 27th. If you have questions, or you would like more information, or you want items added, or you just need any additional information, please contact me or my staff, and we'll get that information to you.
Question.
All right, Councilman Hare. Councilman Hare.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I want to follow back up on what Ms. Block was just speaking of. I'm not able to look at both. Well, there were a number of those items where all of those items had a particular matching amount of money, right? And so when this comes to us on the 27th, are we to do anything between now and the 27th as far as make choices, or is this the total package? Because there is a matchings of money, if I'm understanding.
So in order to receive the home funds, the city is required to do a 25% match.
Right.
So that is just part of the, if you want the home funding, city pays 25% match. There is no match for CDBG. And so if you'll notice in all the plans, there's a breakdown of where we would like those allocation of funds to go. This is your opportunity to weigh in on that decision-making process. We are required to have approval from City Council before submitting the consolidated plan, annual action plan, impediments, and NRSA. We need council's approval before HUD will accept our application.
Okay, well, maybe I was just misunderstanding, because as I looked over at the budget impact and I saw that 226,000 match, then that's what probably, I guess, has thrown me off. So you're telling me the only amount is to look at the 25 and not this other for matching that I'm looking at up under the budget impact?
No, the budget impact is just the 25% match for home funds.
Okay, all right, I got it. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Cindy.
We off mute. All right, okay, thank you, Ms. Blott, looks good. Thank you, Mr. Walton, great work. We look forward to having a more detailed discussion, so thank you. Council item 4.04, as we get into our council member requests, typically we try to keep these under 5 minutes, so I'll be very brief. This was just to bring to council the visibility of now during the census process, having our MSA or our municipal area revisited. Right now, we miss a lot of opportunities because it's just Fayetteville. We're in Hope County's municipal service area, which Hope County only has 50,000 people compared to our 300,000. So we really cap off at 350,000. So you miss companies and corporations and different things that really target larger metropolitan areas. Other communities around us, like Dunn and Harnett County, they are in Raleigh's municipal service area. So they really get considered for a lot more opportunities because they're presenting a larger picture. So it's just determined every 10 years. I don't really know what the process is, but this was brought to council to make sure that we can ask staff to take a look at it to make sure that while the 2020 census is being considered, that we're on top of this, because we may not have another chance for another 10 years. So that is what this ask is tonight, just basically to have Mr. Manager or someone from his team to find out what the process is for us to consider other MSAs. They look at the number of universities. I mean, because all of that is coming from our end. Hope County really is a great county, but it doesn't have any universities that contribute to that, and other demographics that are determined when companies are looking for places to locate. So I think this has hindered our recruitment effort, and it would be good just to find out what the process is. So Councilman Davis, do you have a question?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, is it possible that we get maybe a paragraph synopsis on what the MSA is, background, what it entails? I kind of understand vaguely municipal service area, but for those of us who are new.
Metropolitan, yes.
Please, sir.
Yeah, and so, Mayor, as you mentioned, if you want to get consensus to move this forward, I do know that in conversations I had with Robert Van Giens over the last couple of weeks, Robert at our Economic Development Community, EDC, Economic Development Corporation, is ready to move forward with this because, as the mayor said, the MSA is used for so many different things. It's probably going to be used as probably the second or third stimulus. The larger your MSA, the more folks, the more economic impact, probably the more aid they need. But once you get consensus, I know that EDC with Robert Van Giens would be more than willing to run with this and help the city staff any way we can.
All right. Whose hand is that?
Here.
Okay, Councilman Hare.
Yes, sir. The MSA, what's that range? Is it 3 miles? What's the range? I can't remember now.
You're thinking about that area just outside our city limit jurisdiction.
Right.
So this is something different. This is the area in which we are considered as our metro area. Like you have Atlanta City, but then the metro area of Atlanta is 4 million people. And so when people are looking or companies are looking, Google or these companies are looking, they want to know how many people are in your service area, what's the average income, those kinds of things. So if you look right now, A typical example, Lee County up there where Sanford is benefiting from these Pfizer and those other pharmaceutical companies that are in Research Triangle Park, but they have available land, but they're in their MSA. So they're looking at that whole area as a whole, but they find specific places in those areas. So this would be something that's the way I understand it from hearing from Robo and Economic Development. But I hear that is a tool that we're missing that we need. So this is just to get staff to bring this back to us to tell us what all the nuances are. And
Okay.
so, yeah.
That's fine with me. I appreciate it.
All right.
I support that.
Any other questions, Council? Brooke, anybody else raising their hand? All right, so Council, can we get a consensus to ask staff to maybe bring this back to us? How long do you think it'll take you, Mr. Manager? I know you got a lot on your plate, but couple weeks, okay. So maybe by our next meeting, he'll have something for us to tell us how this is determined and what we need to do. All right, so I'll go down. Do we have questions? Councilman Dawkins?
He's giving a thumbs up.
Oh, okay. All right, Council, so just because Ms. Pam is not where we are, she can't really see us. I'll start with District 1. You can say green or red. So Mayor Pro Tem?
Green.
Councilmember Ingram?
Green.
Councilmember Waddell?
Green.
Councilmember Hare?
Mr. Hare, if you can wave your hand.
I saw him. Councilmember Hare?
You're on mute, sir.
They're like, yeah, or nay?
Now you're still on mute, Mr. Hare.
Great.
Okay, got
Sort
it.
of stuff. Okay.
And,
Councilman Dawkins?
He's thumbs up.
All right, Councilman Wright, Davis?
Green.
Councilman Wright?
Green.
Councilman Banks McLaughlin?
Green.
Thank you.
And Councilmember Kinsler?
Green.
Mayor Green. All right, so that would look forward to that. All right, item 4.05, Councilmember Banks McLaughlin, your councilmember request.
Good afternoon. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, before I go into, I'll be discussing homelessness. Before I go there, I just want all of us city council members, along with the community, the viewers that are listening and watching, we all as a community, we need to focus on what is it that not only city leaders, but the community, what can we do to assist with this pandemic? I just wanted to say that, and I just hope that you guys think about that. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead with the homelessness. I know in the past we discussed about possibly having a day center providing for homelessness. As we can see what's going on right now as far as this pandemic, we have shelters closing. I know one shelter right now is closed. I've heard of another shelter, or possibly two, that plan on closing due to shortage in volunteers and not having the equipment. So I want to propose that instead of us trying to do a day center, I think that it's necessary for us to look into having a homeless shelter. And as far as the day center, I feel that we will be duplicating what the COC, along with other organizations, are implementing, versus it being at solely one location or several locations. So again, I just wanted to just bring that to the table to see if we can, so that we can vote on whether we're going to roll with having a homeless shelter versus a day center.
Member Banks, the council member requests usually work that we will get consensus for staff to come back with some more detailed proposals. We don't typically use these requests to make a policy decision. But what we can do is, if I understand what your question is that you would want to see if there's consensus for staff to come back with what the pros and cons are for a homeless shelter instead of a day center. Is that what you're asking?
No. I would like for us to vote on it, because we've been we've been waiting. This been being talked about years, almost decades, as far as what can we do to prevent or to at least decrease the number of homelessness. I think right now it's urgent. Again, right now, that's the struggle right now that we're facing, is that a lot of these homeless people, they don't have anywhere to go because of the shelters being closed. So if that's going on right now, just imagine when this pandemic, when it's died down, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be more people homeless or experiencing hardship. So I think that this is something that we need to do like now.
So what you're saying is you want us to vote on switching strategies to a homeless Senate shelter without any research about whether the grant is applicable or how much it costs or who.
I would like for the council to agree to go ahead and vote on whether we use a shelter. Did somebody else say something?
I have my hand up.
Who else hand is up?
Dale here.
Right.
I have my hand up as well, Councilmember Ingram.
Do y'all see my picture? Do y'all see me? Can the mayor see me?
I see you.
I can see you, right?
I can see you. So let me see. I got Councilmember Waddell, Dawkins, and Bright. I got you.
But
Okay,
my hand is up as well.
Okay, so y'all, when you're not saying anything, you're in a block about this big. So apologize if I don't see it. I'm asking them to tell me who's waving, okay? So I've got everybody. I might not have it in the right order, but I got you. So we'll start with Councilmember Waddell, Hare, Wright, and Ingram. Dawkins and Ingram.
Thank you. So to Councilmember McLaughlin's point, when we were having our meetings as a subcommittee with the city manager and the other members of staff who were helping us to understand that grant funding. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so as we were having those conversations, we were given the impression that that money could be used for a shelter option. That and quite frankly, that's initially what that money was intended to be utilized for, was emergency response shelter situation, if I'm not mistaken. But as we were going through those conversations, we did have, to her point, we did have that conversation, and I recall being explained that that was an option, but we continued to go in the direction of day center while we were waiting for consensus from council, which to my recollection, we never really got. The last thing that was happening with that was there was supposed to be a visit to Oak City Cares. I would be amenable to the request that Councilmember McLaughlin is making, simply because I am in agreement that we lack emergency shelter in the city of Fayetteville for our residents who are facing homelessness or who are homeless, and we would be duplicating services. And there is still an opportunity for those who are very interested, based upon the information that we were getting back, there is still an opportunity for wraparound services at a shelter, if that's something that partners wanted to come on board and do. And the last thing that I would like to say is, when we were traveling to San Antonio, and Mayor Pro Tem and I had an occasion to be able to visit the Haven for Hope, one of the things that we saw being executed very well was an emergency shelter situation that tiered people through different levels of assistance based upon their readiness to be able to accept and receive the help that was made available to them. So I think that request makes sense. I think that it is, if I'm not mistaken, and city manager, you can correct me, I think it is in line with what the funds could be used for, and I would be supportive of a conversation like that.
Thank you. So the manager and Christoph were shaking their heads. Before I go to Councilmember Harris, is that an allowable use for the grant as presented? So you know,
the grant is for a day center that has a dual purpose, and that it could serve as an emergency shelter when needed. One of the things that we've struggled with, even in talking about the day center, and I think the same is true of an emergency shelter or shelter at all, is what is going to be the city's ongoing operational capability, responsibility, and the sustainability of it as well. I can tell you that absent this grant, there has been no conversation substantively about homelessness in this community in 10 to 15 years. None. And But if there have been a lot of concerns that have been expressed about the day center, and apologies, we actually had a conversation at a staff level last week and felt that we had answered those questions and we were clear to go ahead and engage the architect to begin that work. And so, but if there is the consensus, not consensus for that tonight, and there is a desire to take a step back, then that's helpful for us to know so that we can have that dedicated, informed conversation. Because one of the things that I think has been alluded to is that a lot of the agencies which are out here now focus and are supported through volunteers. And when something like COVID happened, which is once in a, we hope once in a generation, not just a lifetime, but generation or more, century, we have the volunteers who are unable to provide that level of support. And the only agency which is still actively engaged, agencies, are those that have a sustainability plan, have paid staff, and all of those things. But the question tonight, as I understand it, is can those funds, that grant, be used to provide a shelter?
Not a emergency.
Not just an emergency shelter, but a shelter versus the day center. We believe we know the answer to that is no. I think we've asked that several different times. But even if we can't, and it can only be used for a day shelter, day center with as an emergency shelter when needed. If the council has concerns about whether that's duplication of service or whether or not that's our lane or it's not needed, it's no time like the present time for us to stop this, because we are getting ready to expend some money and engaging the architect to move forward. And so, Mayor and Council, any direction y'all want to give us would be appreciated.
All right. Council Member Hare, and then Dawkins and Wright.
But my question is somewhat, I think the city manager started a little bit alluding to. Goes into running the center versus what it is that the county already does and what our other partners we already have in place that are doing. I think is a little bit more we need to know if that's something that we as a group want to consider. But unless he's saying 100% no, I want to really understand if what's already being proposed with, if we can use that funding for both. And he somewhat alluded to that, but I didn't know if he was saying, well, let me find out and give you a 100% answer later. Sir.
Christoph.
Christoph.
I can respond to this. The funding that we have available is coming to us through FEMA in a hazard mitigation grant program. So the whole point, in fact, what makes it eligible is the fact that it operates as an emergency shelter during storm events. So you can't have people living there or there won't be capacity for them in an emergency shelter. So actually the fact that we can use it as a day center is ancillary to the fact that it's actually an emergency shelter, which is what we're trying to use to make it eligible for the funding. The funding we have is $2 million for capital, $1.9 million for soft costs associated with development, but no operational dollars at all. So just $3.9 million, $2 million, which is the limit for capital. But the reason we're eligible for this grant funding is all is through storm hazard mitigation.
As a result of the last hurricane, we applied for that.
As a result of the hurricane, that's correct, sir.
All right. So Councilman Dawkins. Oh, Councilman Harry, you still talking? Your phone's muted, sir.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was moving my lips.
Okay. All right. Well, I said.
Yeah, but what I was just saying that is, I think it's not always, we don't normally try to move forward in voting without having all of the information first. So I really do want to support my councilwoman. She has a very good point. I think we need a little bit more information first before we try to move forward and have a 100% vote tonight, which normally we don't make policy motions during the work session other than taking consensus, if I'm correct or not.
Only supposed to be 5-minute requests. Council, I've still got Councilman Dawkins, Wright, Ingram, and Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One question, Mr. City Manager or Deputy City Manager Bauer. I recall that we voted to risk about $300,000 because if we don't get this particular day center approved, we lose that $300,000. Is that true? And then I've got another question.
That is true. And I just want to clarify, it's not HMGP, it's CDBG-DR, Community Development Disaster Recovery. I want to make sure I give you the acronym there. But yes, we have, council has appropriated $300,000. That is fully reimbursable should we eventually get awarded the full grant and become eligible for the full funding.
Gain approval. Very good.
Wow, and of course, we haven't spent that money yet. We have a proposed scope of service with the architect for about $72,000 to start the design process and to finish up putting together the cost estimates for the application process. We haven't executed that contract yet. That would be the first big piece of that $300,000 that we propose to spend.
That is exactly my understanding, Mr. Deputy City Manager. Secondly, I like Council Lady Courtney Banks McLaughlin's idea. I think this is something that merits further study, and I will support that at some point. I can't support changing our day center to a shelter right away because we got that $300,000 at risk for sure. Secondly, we've made a request. At least I saw an email to our Public Works Commission, and I would support a portion of that money if we're able to get some money from PWC in addition to our monthly money that we look hard at this shelter. But lastly, and then I'll get back to listening again, keep in mind the county, we've got to find a way to work together with the county because they're the ones that get the operational funding support long term, unless this council decides, okay, we're going to, set aside $400,000 or $500,000 a year to operate this thing at a minimum. So I think Council Lady Banks McLaughlin is on to something here. However, I want to keep going with what we have going because we've got that $300,000 at risk. We got some things underway, and I do hope that we can get some money from PWC to do these kind of things that this COVID-19 Wuhan flu has impacted our planet. Thank you.
Okay, Councilman Dawkins, thank you. Councilman Wright.
Yes, Mayor. I tend to agree with Councilwoman McLaughlin, but there are some concerns that I have and that we've been, going back and forth with the day center versus a shelter, day center versus a shelter. The staff have put in a lot of work through several years to get to this point. And as some of the council members have spoken, reference to losing the grant versus to doing something with the money that has been allocated because of the storm. At this point, the staff is ready, to pull the trigger with the, with the design of the building. My concern is, it's given for an emergency shelter. That's the only reason we're getting the money per se. Now, whether that money can be a day center versus, emergency shelter, whether once the building get up, because we still have a lot of conversation to be had once the building is erected. My question or comment is, let us go ahead on and put the building on the ground. Because if we don't, we're going to lose this money. And then I know it's kind of messed up because we really don't know yet the operational functions. Y'all lost me? Hello?
We can hear you.
Okay, good. The operational functions, we just don't know. But I believe in this sense, with the pandemic that has hit, and really the homeless is going to be impacted more probably, and the poor more than anyone else in our society. So that gives us a little leverage going forward. In this sense, I would say if you build it, they will come. So, and when I talk about that, I mean the county, you know, divvying up to do their part. I mean, it's such a necessity at this point that we cannot, you know, push it down the road any further. So with Councilwoman Banks McLaughlin statement of, hey, this thing, we waited and waited and waiting, but we really haven't been waiting. It's just the staff has been working behind the scenes to get to this point. But I hear what you're saying, but I think we need to go forward with where we are, because really we have no other choice. If we delay this, we could lose everything. Thank you.
There we go.
Thank you, Councilmember Wright. Councilmember Ingram.
So I was coming to this conversation on the thoughts that this would be homeless efforts for COVID-19. But I will say, being that District 2 is most saturated with homeless activity, I am all for having a conversation about a homeless center. And to get calls on a consistent basis, especially now, of concerns about slowing the spread, but how can we slow the spread if homeless individuals are still out, still not really being able to practice social distancing, because in its own self, they are a community for themselves as well. Yes, we put out the hygiene stations, but at the end of the day, these individuals don't have anywhere to go, especially with us now having a curfew. So I'm all for that conversation to support a homeless center. My next piece is, earlier this week, I called city manager to ask, you know, if we could use possibly smaller recreation centers, a room to give homeless to give the homeless at least somewhere to be during the curfew. That was not a possibility. But as I'm saying, I'm coming to this conversation, you know, for COVID-19 efforts. But I do have concern of individuals being out on the streets, especially during a curfew, and especially while we are seeing rapid growth of the spread of the virus, and not all testing is being done. And whether you see yourself in these homeless individuals or not, they're still a part of our community. My last piece is Councilmember Dawkins mentioned about seeing about some of the money coming from PWC. Well, in our small group meetings, from my understanding, the funds that we were requesting are to cover
It's just a statement. So
moving forward.
this is
So
on this homeless piece. So I think Councilman Dawkins was just making that as a part of a last comment. I don't want to open that up because that'll get us too far off of this item. So can you?
Well. So my next, I think we do need to move forward with starting conversations to see about what a homeless center, a homeless shelter looks like, because moving forward, we're going to, as a council and as a city, we are going to have to lay heavy eyes on our poverty here. When we had our strategic planning meeting, it said, moving forward,
we gotta bring it in now. Bring it home.
900 people were going to poverty annually. That number, I'm sure, is going to go up. That's all I have to say.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess my question is, I think a lot of it was answered, but I'm going to go back on it. So when we were talking about, we have gone along with our grant that we got that originally went with the county. So if we did a homeless shelter, I'm just asking the question again, will that grant pay for it? I just need a yes or no.
No.
Okay. So then my next question is, I think that we do need to keep discussing it, but for the sake of this request, do we continue as we're going, but then come back and talk about the homeless shelter? And before I stop, when the hurricanes hit, the county put up 2 shelters in high schools. Has that even been discussed during this pandemic?
No, not to my knowledge. There has been, not from the county, no. The health director on a call last week, and I gave you guys the notes on Thursday and the weekly report, in the COVID daily report, indicated that any placement of a shelter for the homeless, like congregate housing and stuff like that, there are a couple of issues. One is you need prior approval in order to make sure you're going to have funding to run it. But also, to any place that you're putting people who are exposed or potentially exposed to COVID, under the health director, you would also need to make sure that there were medical providers, or there was some, you just don't want to put people together and not test them. Well, and there would just be a larger issue. But
absolutely,
yeah.
Mayor Pro Tem, you finished?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right. So, council, I kind of am under the impression that we need a comprehensive strategy to deal with the homeless. That it doesn't have to be a one or another. That I think I can certainly support a shelter or the research of what that looks like and who runs it. And we don't have all those answers today, just like we don't have all the answers of the day center today. What we do have about the day center is that we know there's funding for that particular scenario. But we were going to take a trip to Raleigh to see how it functions, who runs it, who does what, because it has to be a collaborative effort of either the city and county plus some private agency or some private agency, but we don't have all the answers to it. But I don't think that it's a one or the other conversation, that this community, our city, has to do something meaningful and all-inclusive for the homelessness. And I don't think that either one of these two things in and of themselves will solve the problems for this population. So I certainly support Councilmember Banks's request, if it is to bring back information so that we can know what we're voting on and talking about. But I'll let her articulate it. It's your request. So Councilmember Banks, I'll give you the last word before we give a yay or nay.
Mayor.
Ma'am.
Can I say something?
Please.
Okay. I did not think that it would take this much to convince city leaders to do what's right. I mean, we've been talking about this for some time. I know we discussed with the day center, with the funding. We sat and had a meeting, and I asked if, with those funding, if we were able to either do a shelter or the shelters that we already have in place here in the city, if we can expand those shelters. And I was told we could. So I think, I mean, if we hadn't even came up and figured it out with the day center, because we've been talking about this at least since I've been in the office for some months, and nothing still haven't been brought to the table for us to vote on and for us to just get everything moving. How long, can I ask a question, how long have we had this funding?
Yes, ma'am. One of the issues that does predate the current council members who came on in December was that the grant was assigned to the county. It was, and we were working through the county to try to get monies to hire an architect to answer baseline questions that the state had in order to release the full funding. Working with the county, we were successful in lobbying the state to put this grant where it was directly under the control of the city and not going through the county. And so a lot of the time that we spent once we got notice of the award was trying to work hand in hand with the county to bring this to fruition. And so the things that we've done since about December, one has been we've asked the council to put money aside so that we could go ahead and start spending that to start answering some of the questions, hire an architect. We have had a series of small group meetings directly after we put the RFQ out for an architect. There were questions that came up after that. And again, speaking for myself, we really thought we had answered all of those questions or any hesitancy we had with the council's action of moving the money and then the discussion we had after the RFQ. But it seems like there is still some question.
And then I have another, well, not question, but just a statement. I mean, I hear you guys mention, I know we have the funding for, I believe, what, FEMA. You said 2-point-something million. I don't remember the, was it 2 million?
3 million. But it's not eligible. It's not eligible for what your proposal is.
I'm sorry?
What they're saying, and we've got to wrap this up. This is why council member requests are just for more information. What the staff was saying is that the grant through FEMA that came as a result of the hurricane is not eligible for just a shelter, but they're going to double check that.
Okay, well then I guess because it's a conflict with the information. I mean, when we were in the meeting, we were told, I asked that specific question on whether we can build a shelter or if we can expand with the other shelters. And it was a yes, we can do that. But we decided to go with the daycare. And we still haven't, well, I hadn't heard anything else back with the day center. But I'll just leave it at that. And I mean, we can vote on or however you guys want to.
Well, it's your request, so you're going to have to tell us something. So if it is, your ask is, like I said at the beginning, if it is to do this instead of the day center, is that your ask, or is to have them research what this option looks like?
No, we've been researching for a long time now. I would like to ask the city council if we can vote on doing a shelter instead of a day center. And I want you guys to keep in mind too, we're spending money on other projects.
I got you, Councilmember Bank. So this is she's asking for a consensus to give a nod to the shelter with the limited or the information that we've been given tonight. So council, I'll go down the line so that we can move, because these are only supposed to be 5 minutes. So I'll start with District 1, Mayor Pro Tem.
Mr. Mayor, I feel like I need to be clear. So what she is asking, instead of doing the day center, we're going to do a homeless shelter, which the day center has money through a grant, but the homeless center doesn't. Is that my understanding?
Yes, there are no identified funding sources for the homeless shelter. The day center does have a grant, but
Mr. Mayor, sir.
All right.
If I would have a comment, please.
Well, hold on, Councilman Wright. Let me answer this question, make sure we're clear before we take this consensus. The ask is to, from what I understand her saying, is to see if the council will vote to move toward a shelter instead of the day center option. But to your point, the grant restrictions do not allow for the shelter just in emergency situations, like when there's a state of emergency. So not a shelter on a daily consistent basis. But staff is going to check on that. But right now, they are saying the answer is a no vote. So does that answer your question? I'll go to Councilmember Wright. Then we've got to move this, y'all.
It answers my question.
Okay.
Councilman Wright.
Mr. Mayor, I think above anyone would love to have a homeless shelter, but at this point, it's not realistic with the monies that we are dealing with at this time. So the vote will be mute because there is no funding for a homeless shelter at this time. We've mentioned that several times in this conversation, and I'm passionate about the homeless as well, and I want to see us go forward. But at this point, based upon the request, it's going to be a no because we just don't have the funds. I mean, as far as a homeless shelter.
What can be considered, Councilman Wright, just to move this is after we take that vote, up or down, some other council member, Ms. Banks, McLaughlin, or some yourself, whomever, I think we support the concept of a shelter, can put in a separate request for a separate discussion. And that way it'll send a clear message that this is not a vote against that concept. This is based on choosing between one or the other tonight with no information.
Okay.
Right.
Mayor.
All right, Councilman Banks, we've got to move this. Yes, ma'am.
Hold on, Mayor. I just got one quick question. I just want to ask city manager and attorney, because again, I asked that question. That's the reason why I brought it to the table. I asked the question, with that funding, could we have a shelter, or can we add to the other shelters? Do you guys not remember me asking that question? And I mean, I think Councilwoman Waddell was there. I believe
Councilman Banks, are you saying because your request?
I guess I'll ask the question again.
Well, let me ask you something just to make sure I'm clear, because I'm confused now. Are you saying because your request said in place of? So are you now saying in addition to?
No, what I said is the reason I brought this up because we had a meeting and it was said that I asked a question, can we, with the day center, I mean, instead of a day center, can we possibly do a shelter, or can we use the shelters that we already have in place and just add to those shelters? And the answer was yes. So now today I'm hearing something totally different.
So in light of what you're hearing, are you willing to, you want to move forward, or do you want to withdraw the request? That's what we've got to get to.
No, I want them to answer the question.
Well, they've answered it several times. They said the money can't be used. So now what I'm asking is, do you want me to have council take a vote on this? But we've got to move this forward. So
that's okay. And I understand. Well, council, you guys can take a vote on it. That's fine.
Okay. All right. So council, with that being said, because we still have another item.
Chair Colvin, may I say something? I've been silent on this matter so far.
Yeah,
Councilmember Dawkins.
Yes, this is supposed to be a 5-minute request, y'all, but Councilmember Waddell, you go ahead, and then we'll come back for consensus, okay?
Councilmember Banks and McLaughlin, I'm supportive of your request. I would ask if you would be willing to make the caveat that the city manager would have to provide us the information or the terms of what the money can be spent for in order for us to be certain that the case is what's being presented to us, because I do understand what's being stated in terms of if the money cannot be transferred. And I agree with you. I recall hearing that we could do that also. Now I could be, maybe this COVID-19 situation has boggled my brain. I don't know, but I remember that also. But I will say that if the city manager can allow us to be able to look through, and they can go back and review and make sure, because it was my understanding, everyone, that we had to get a contingency for a day center. We had to make sure that the funds could be used for a day center because of what they were originally earmarked for. And so I could be supportive of this request that Councilmember Banks McLaughlin has brought to the table with the provision that city manager can go back and review that information and be clear on whether or not these funds can be utilized for that purpose. So, Councilmember Banks McLaughlin, throw that out to you to see if you might be willing to include that in your request this evening.
So let me wrap this up. So Councilmember Banks, the proposal on the table is, I think, because we put that proposal out some time ago, is if your request, and you stated it a couple of times, is to look into a homeless shelter instead of the day center. But what the caveat was there was to do that with conditions that the money could be used, although staff is saying that they're 99% sure that it can be used.
Okay, well, if the money, since now that it said that we can't use it for the homeless shelter, I would like to move forward with this vote on going ahead and having them literally go ahead and move forward with the actual day center. And I would also like for us to look into building a homeless shelter.
All right, well.
And I know it's different
it's gotta be-
parts, but I mean,
Right,
now,
well, the day center is already, the council voted numerous times, that's already moving. So your request has to be specific to something different. Are you saying that you want us to do what exactly?
since the money is our, well, you know what, better yet, since we waiting on information, because again, we were told that homeless shelter, that money can go towards that. I would want us to move forward to staff look into that information, and I would love to get that information back like sometime this week so we can move forward.
Well, again, these requests are not really set up to work like that. You'll get a nod from the council as to you want staff to research something, and then they bring that back at the next opportunity, because they have.
Well, I mean, I don't have.
Hold on 1 second. Hold on 1 second. 1 second for me, Councilman Bank. So what I'm just trying to get clarity on, because we've got to either, we're going to move forward on your request, or you can withdraw to talk to the manager, kind of get a more direct request. But the council at this point, at least me, I don't know exactly what it is you're asking us to give you a consensus for.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to get that data. I'd like to get that information, yeah.
So that's nothing that you need a council action for. So you and Mr. Manager can talk about that. That's correct. So you'll get back to that. All right, Councilmember Banks, you've got item 4.06, early child care.
Before I go there, I can get that information by this week.
That's a conversation that you and the city manager may have to. I don't know what his schedule is, but. So this is your 5 minutes for item 4.06.
Okay, I'll be discussing child care. Hold on 1 second. I will be discussing with emergency child care assistant. Prime example, I'm working from home right now. I'm sure you guys can hear my children in the background. As this COVID-19 has led to our schools closing, we have our healthcare providers, our emergency responders, essential workers having to still go to work. And as a city, I would like to propose that we provide emergency care for those individuals using our parks and recreation facilities. I'm on phone. I would like to use those facilities, and at this point, I'll let you guys ask any questions, and I'm more than willing to answer them.
I have a question.
Councilmember Ingram.
So as I said again, I had a conversation this week with city manager. This week, no, it couldn't have been this week. Last week, charged with COVID-19. I did have a conversation with city manager. I was coming from a homeless perspective, and then I did ask him about the child emergency, simply because I saw Councilmember Banks McLaughlin's request, and I wanted to know, with the same concerns at a city perspective apply to the homeless as well. I think it is a worthy request. I do think it, but once city manager had kind of explained to me what the concerns were, so I would necessarily, if Councilmember Banks McLaughlin is okay, like I would support it, but I do think we should probably hear out what the city manager's perspective is on this, and also I would ask city manager, in your response, should the council move forward with giving our first responders this support, how is it, can we help out if we cannot use our parks and rec system buildings? How is it that we can, or what are we currently doing to help with this?
Please.
I did have a conversation with Councilmember Banks McLaughlin, and as well as Councilman Ingram and a few other folks who called and asked questions about this. As I shared, I think with all of you, the purpose of tonight is for you guys to give staff direction. You don't have to convince me of anything. You don't. If council wants us to research this, we will. What I shared though with all of you is that this is a space that the city has no experience in running an emergency child care center. And we had discussed this as a staff many years ago about what it would look like for us when we have fire and police and 911 personnel who have to work overnight and them trying to find quality child care. But those years ago, the conversation went no further than that, just a conversation. Again, we will do whatever council asks us to do to take a look at, determine whether or not this is possible or if there are other options to meet the same goal. But in the age of COVID, just immediately, as all of you know, there are a lot of challenges with us trying to stand something up like that, particularly, again, when we now have 56 cases that have just been identified. Yesterday, it was 43.
It's up 13.
And it went up. And so there's also some information that we received this afternoon from the Partnership for Children about, but if it's council's interest for us to explore this, then we do have a great organization manages and coordinates child care and early childhood education in our county and surrounding counties, which is the Partnership for Children. And I'd be happy to work with Councilman Banks McLaughlin or any other council members and staff and the partnership to see how we could help. But again, this is something for council to give staff direction, not for staff to tell council no. But my recommendation would be, given the complexity of childcare, given the time that we live in now with COVID, and it just presents a lot of just challenges. But you can always find a reason to say no, and what I try to do is we always try to look for a way to say yes. But this does present some challenges just on the face of it.
All right. So
did anybody have any questions? I mean, any more questions, or can I chime in?
Well, my next question to you, Councilmember Banks McLaughlin, is: did you have any alternatives to where, if we are not able to use our Parks and Rec, did you have an alternative or had any partners that wanted to come to the table? Because I mean, I can most certainly help get a list together to help, push whatever needs to happen, because I do agree. For instance, my stepdad is a PWC supervisor. My brother cannot go see him right now because he's still having to work. So I get it. But how do you have an alternative?
No, I don't have another alternative. I mean, there are other child care facilities that are open, but as far as the recreation center, I've spoken with Michael Gibson, the director, and he's on board with it. As far as us, if you read the purpose statement for a Parks and Recreation Center, I'll read the last sentence. It says, this program provides assistance and facility used during emergency situations and extreme weather conditions. So I don't see why we couldn't have it at our Parks and Recreation Center. And it seems like tonight we're coming up with, not you, Ms. Ingram, but too many. It's one of those where we're coming up with too many issues of not doing the right thing. We're supposed to be leaders, and we are policymakers. So anything that we know that we can do that's going to benefit our city, we should definitely do that. It's too much blaming. Oh, the county's supposed to do this. The county's supposed to do that. At this point right now, we are a community. We're supposed to do this together. Rather, whoever.
Councilmember Banks, part of being a board is that we share our thoughts with everyone else. And then if there's consensus, hold on one second. If there's consensus, then we get information to make a decision. We can't say because we are not agreeing or understanding your request initially that this board is not doing the right thing. You mentioned that a couple of times tonight. So we just want to understand what your request is, but I don't think that the motives of not doing the right thing are a part of it. So we just may not understand what your ask is. So I will get you to repeat it again, because basically you're asking for emergency time only provisions, or are you asking for that the staff looks into a process in which first responders' kids can be kept? What is your ask specifically?
I'm asking for us to, I'm trying to propose that we use our recreation center facilities for care for our staff, for our emergency essential staff.
All right, Councilman Wright and then Kinston.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that, you know, Council Member Banks McLaughlin has a passionate concern because our first responders are on the front line out there doing, you know, hard work and really putting their lives on the line, especially now with this coronavirus epidemic or pandemic out here. My concern though is will we as a city take on liability in those situations where we as a city opens the daycare to handle our first responders' children, and God forbid someone one of the kids come up positive with the virus under our care. The question would be to the city manager or the city attorney, would we have any liability under those circumstances?
Well, Mayor, if I could, Councilmember Wright, I think that where staff would feel more comfortable would be if there's interest in us pursuing this, give us that direction to come back and what that would look like in partnership with others. I think that some of the same concerns that you have mentioned are the concerns that led me to have some hesitancy when I heard about it. But if council directs us to do some research on it, we could come back. But the timing of it does make it complicated, not only about trying to stand up the shelter, but who would man the daycare, what activities. I mean, all of the questions that you pose are questions we would run through, but we would, if council gives us that direction, to pursue.
You have
She's been in 2 rounds, so we don't have to call.
I don't think I've had 2 rounds on this item.
Yeah, well, yes, you. So I got some folks who haven't spoken yet. So Councilmember Hare and Dawkins, and then we'll have to call a question because the 5 minutes is up. Yeah. Councilman Hare and then Dawkins.
Yes, sir. Can I be heard?
Yes, sir. We're here.
Okay. No, I understand where this subject is coming from, and I do support it. Our men and women are on the front line, but I think we need to, if this is something that we're going to take on this challenge, which is a big challenge, then I think it's a little more additional information that we must have before we can give it an up or down or a consensus. We need to get some additional information if that's something that the city council is going to take on.
All right.
But I do like the cause.
Okay. Councilman Dawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's a laudable idea from Councilmember Banks McLaughlin, and I wish we could do this, but the liability is huge. You just don't crank up a child care center. We've got to do a whole lot of interviewing and testing. You're looking for predators, sexual assaulters. I mean, the amount of time and effort it's going to take is going to be probably a couple months. And I cannot support doing this. We got that nice email from the Partnership for Children. There are private enterprises that are open, and that's the way I'm leaning on it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Sir, Councilmember Kinston.
Yes, Councilmember Banks McLaughlin. I just have one question. What hours of operation are you finding that there's a need for? I just want to make sure that council's understanding that. From
7 to 7, but I would like to say, if Mayor, can I speak for a second?
Yes, ma'am. She's asking a question to you.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Councilwoman.
No, please speak. She's asking you a question.
Oh, okay. No, from as of right now, from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., and that just depends on the demand. But I do want to say, I know you guys mentioned as far as someone getting being positive for the coronavirus and the city being liable for it. We still, our transit is still in operation. So what's the liability for being a driver on a transit and taking it? I mean, if you know, what's that liability like? Is it not the same?
Well, I think what some of the concerns were, I think DHHS, from a couple of providers that have reached out since they saw this, said that the state has taken them through some special training. And so if you're amenable to staff researching how to partner with somebody or to do somebody, because one, we don't know if the state is going to say, you've got to get the same training that they have had. And from a compliance end, so because, you know, this is a request, and I think you got a lot of people who want to solve the problem. Are you amenable to directing staff or taking a consensus with us to explore partnerships or other options, or you just want it to be the way you presented it?
Just two more things, and then we can vote on it. Okay, well, as far as that email that was sent, now with the North Carolina Child Care ncdhhs.gov website, they have a list of programs that are exempt from the regulation, and recreation centers are on there. However, I don't, you know, it's at this point whatever is beneficial for our community, those who putting their life on the line, whatever's going to benefit them. That's why I brought this up, so that we can provide some type of services for them. Also, as far as research-wise, I've been on the phone back and forth with Sacramento. They have the same program, and they didn't had it for almost a month now, and it's been a success for them. So I wouldn't have brought something to the table if I wasn't knowledgeable about it.
All right, so did she answer your questions, Ms. Kent?
Yes, thank you.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem. Your phone must be muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I guess I'm going to go back, and the question that I have is that we did have the email from Partnership for Children that basically said that, you know, there are people out there doing it. I understand Council Member McLaughlin's ask. I think I understand the ask, but my question is there any way that we could maybe have a meeting with Partnership for Children and Ms. McLaughlin, and we can talk about that partnership, or even bring it to the city-county liaison meeting when we bring it back up, and have Councilmember McLaughlin there with us. I think that we don't want to take away from small business that is, you know, working now too, and we need to look at all aspects of it. But I believe that everybody wants to have the conversation, and you know, even if our Parks and Rec buildings are not where it needs to be, the conversation does not need to stop there. So that is my question, is for Council Member McLaughlin, if we could if the ask could kind of be changed to that, instead of just a yes or no of it being in the Parks and Rec buildings, because I believe that everybody still wants to continue the conversation.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and go to Councilmember Davis.
Yes, I have a question for Councilwoman Banks McLaughlin, or the city, anyone. Do we know how many employees are going through this hardship? City employees? We're talking about city employees, aren't we? First responders. And first responders, we're talking about city employees. Do we know how many city employees are going through this hardship, are having this hardship, or expressed this hardship? Because we are, as leaders, in the business of solving problems. So I'm trying to figure out what's the scope, the span, depth, width of the problem. How big is the egg? How many people do we know about? Have we heard 25 complaints? Where is it coming from? Or are we? I'm trying to get that question, because you may be able to entertain something else, a solution to help. But we know. Ma'am?
And I can answer that. I brought this up earlier this month. I also request staff to send out emails and do a needs assessment to see how many people are interested in, if this was to pass, how many people are interested, and I'm still waiting to hear something back.
Okay, I guess.
Yes, ma'am. We asked the fire and police chiefs to circulate with their teams, and I think there was one person who expressed, had questions about it, but we also circulated to all city employees the information we received from the Partnership for Children about the subsidy that's available for essential city, essential workers. But so to answer your question, we have not received anyone that has said, I fit the bill or I need this. But that does not, again, council, stop you guys if it's an interest for us to explore it, to explore it.
All right. Councilman Davis, did that cover what you needed to know, sir?
Yes, I just had to say that I agree that we need to make sure we have resources in place to help when issues pop up. I just want to know that we have the issue and that we're fixing what the issue is. So,
all right.
I'm sorry, Councilman Dave, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I said I'm all for addressing the issue to whatever extent it takes, because our first responders, I definitely agree, on the front line. They do know the things that we're not doing at night when we're in our bed after 9 o'clock. We're not home after 9 o'clock. I just wanted to get a scope, a picture of what the real issue is, how many are being affected, and what adaptations, what solutions do we need to put in place to solve this issue, solve the issue that we're talking about.
All right, we'll go briefly to Councilman Ingram, and then we're gonna have to take temperature council, and then we'll wrap this up.
Thank you, Mayor Colvin. My sentiment was going, and it goes back to what I asked in the beginning. Our Councilmember Banks McLaughlin, would you be open to the partnering, whereas the city supported daycares that are open, and Mayor Pro Tem Jensen mentioned what I was getting ready to bring up at a small business perspective. Say we stand up these parks, these shelters at Parks and Recs, at our Parks and Recs. But I'm glad you told us that in that list, Parks and Recs is a part of it. But say you stand that up, and given the economic standpoint that our small businesses are in, some might just close, because what I'm finding is some are staying open just for those 5 children that they have. And that may be at least paying the rent or at least paying utilities. And so that brings up a really valid question for our small businesses. But I'm glad you mentioned that Parks and Rec could be used, but me personally, I would like to see us use a partnership method first. And there are other daycares out there aside from Partnership for Children. However, they are the ones that reached out to us offering their services. So that would be my question to you. Are you opposed to something like that?
Yes, I'm definitely open for that, but I just now got an email today, a few minutes before the meeting. Had this been discussed before or information been sent out to us, I wouldn't have, tried to implement something like this. So yes, I'm definitely for it, because it's going to benefit our whole community. So definitely.
So I think we had proposed that a while back. So if I'm hearing this, I'll bring this to a head just to make sure we're clear. This would asking staff to research if there's an opportunity for partnerships or other options. Is what's at hand? Is that right, Ms. Banks McLaughlin? Because I'm gonna run down the list for consensus. So yeah.
A quick question.
5 minutes. I've been gone a long time ago, but very quick. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so if we were to partnership with another organization, would we help fund it rather than using our recreation center where we already have the staff who's currently still working?
Well, that is what staff would bring back to us. Of course, what was mentioned to me today by one of the businesses, in addition to what Councilmember Ingram said, that because you have a lot of people working from home, which means they didn't need the child care, which means that their revenues were cut, that you have a lot of daycare centers who are really on the brink of trying to adjust those revenues. So whatever option staff said, I think we're more equipped to help from a financial support, in my opinion, than us to stand up our own process and compete with them, which could be a violation of the amalgamation clause. What's that clause called? Yeah, where government competes with small business. So
okay. Then one more thing too, if we can just get that information and post it on our page.
But first thing we got to do is to get consensus to have staff bring that back to us, and then after that we can tell them what to do after that. So that'll be the ask that this request is connected to here in just a second after Councilmember Waddell speaks.
Are we asking? I'm not clear on what the ask is. Are we asking for financial assistance for the care providers, or are we asking for financial assistance on behalf of the city for the first responders who need care?
What Councilmember Ingram proposed, which I think she was open to, was to explore an opportunity for partnership. We don't know what the details of the partnership are, but I think she
wouldn't that fall under conversation that's being had in terms of the small business assistance?
It kind of would, but we don't know what the details of the partnership are, if the assistance is financial.
But if it's, I guess what my question is, if shifting from her original council's intent, which was to stand up our rec centers,
right,
is that she should be working with the group that's doing the small business assistance to see how that would all play in? Or is this some separate, because it doesn't make sense for us to approve for staff to go look at this particular isolated incident if we're going to be saying we're trying to offer assistance to small businesses, of which many of these daycares qualify. And so if we're changing the scope of what Councilmember Banks McLaughlin's request is, then I think that we should take that into consideration. And I will ask, because each time that we've done consensus, we've gone from top to bottom. I will ask, sir, if you would mind going this time from 9 to 1, just to kind of switch things up a little bit.
Okay. All right. I got to think a little more on my feet with that, but that's fine. All we were doing was Councilmember Ingram proposed another option. So don't know what that looks like, but these requests are just to ask council to research it. I mean, the staff to research it, because they are limited on doing in-depth research without coming through this process. So Councilmember Banks, this is your request. I don't want to speak for you, but you've got to say what it is, and I will start from 9 to work my way up. And I'll be going to Councilmember Kinston, work my way down, I'm sorry. Councilmember Banks, please restate what you're asking the city council to consider.
I'm just going to go ahead and take it for a vote. I'm trying to propose opening up the Parks and Recreation Center for emergency child care for essential employees.
All right, thank you. So starting with Councilmember Kinston, yay or nay, based on what she just said.
Right.
Councilmember, Banks McLaughlin, I'm assuming that you're green, right?
Yes, green.
Okay. Councilmember Davis?
Red.
Councilmember Dawkins?
Red.
All right. Councilmember Hare?
Red, sir.
Councilmember Waddell?
Red.
Councilmember Ingram?
Red.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Red.
And Mayor, red. All right, thank you.
Right.
Oh, Councilmember Wright.
You
All right, Councilmember Wright. I almost asked.
I should say green just for that. No.
All right, what's your vote, sir?
Red.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Council. Council, that concludes it. So look for a motion to adjourn, and y'all be safe.
I thought you had one more.
Second. So move.
We don't read that. All right, so I saw some thumbs, so y'all have a good one.
Oh, Councilmember Hare is
Saying something? He's trying to turn his computer off, ain't he?
Oh, yeah, he's good. All right.
That was his thumb.